We praise God once again for this beautiful privilege He granted us, bringing us all together in the morning, acknowledging God's abundant grace and mercy towards us, granting us His blessings unfailing every day, showing us the path that we ought to take, giving us instructions how we are to face this world through wise men, through their wonderful sayings in those teachings, through their sayings that we are learning every day. And this wisdom that God is sharing with His people, we too may be the worthy recipients and also to share this with others. Once we receive a blessing of God, we are responsible to share it with others. That is God's wonderful plan. We will continue our study in the book of Proverbs in chapter 24 and verses 28 to 29. Proverbs 24, verses 28 to 29, reading, "Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. For would you deceive with your lips? Do not say, 'I will do to him just as he has done to me. I will render to the man according to his work.'" Here is God's much care and concern for His people, where God creating human beings, establishing families and communities and society, and God wanted human beings to enjoy life. But sin has changed the wonderful plan that God had for His children. And what chaos, trouble, and evil has come in relationships between members of a family or members of a community or society. And so today, in these couple of verses, the wise man is telling us the importance of speaking the truth about others. To speak truthfully is certainly an attribute which God has for His people, but is becoming a rare commodity in the world. Speaking truthfully. Somehow we see people with what they hear from others, they will certainly color and add more and say it to somebody. This is somehow what has become in this world. We become, instead of being faithful conduits, we become, in a way, influencing, trying to change, and thus becoming a great cause for disunity, causing rivalry and enmity among fellow human beings. And so God is telling us that we should not be a witness who would speak without a cause, without knowing what is the whole truth. To speak without full information certainly would be a wrong witness. This word witness is used, of course, in judicial circumstances, in other places as well. But this word witness, in day-to-day language, we can simply say that you bear a testimony or you state the facts, what you have seen, yourself and not trying to perhaps change a little bit, add a little bit to what you have heard and tell. A faithful witness is one who bears an evidence to what he has seen personally and heard about. And so, in bearing a witness, this verse is warning us that we should not bear false witness. If you should ever speak, we should only speak nothing but the truth. If you should choose to speak or choose to give a witness or called upon to testify, we should only speak truth and nothing but the truth. And this is what most people, I believe, even promise in a court, that they would be speaking truth. And many times when we give information for a profile or for whatever, they would ask you to make a statement. All the information I've given is correct to the best of my knowledge, be it documentation and so on. And so here this verse is urging us to be truthful and never to give a false witness, even if it means that you have to speak to somebody who has wronged you. And here is an opportunity for you to take a personal revenge. And as we will see in our study, revenge is something which is God's work. God is the one who will meet justice. It is God's duty. And we as human beings should never assume God's responsibility and duty to give justice and to make statements and to take revenge, especially when we have legal or interpersonal conflicts. This verse is telling us not to falsely accuse your neighbor. You may be waiting for an opportunity. If your neighbor has wronged you, you could not speak to him, but you wait for an opportunity, and when you have to speak about him, you may speak accusing him, sometimes falsely, or sharing information which is not appropriate to a situation and context. Or maybe you're waiting to take revenge. If your neighbor has done you some wrong, you could not face him directly, you wait for an opportunity and use this to take revenge. But this verse tells us that we should leave vengeance to God. As Romans chapter 12, verse 19, we will look at this verse for a moment in Paul's epistle to the Romans, chapter 12 and verse 19. Paul is telling us and quoting the Old Testament, but admonishing the Romans, beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. He is quoting from the Old Testament. But instead he says, therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. If your enemy is angry at you, and he's waiting in some ways to harm you, but you meet him now in need. What do? He may be hungry or he has some need. God is telling us to provide for them their need. And this enemy of yours who's waiting to take revenge on you, who is waiting to even up with you, he will actually feel so embarrassed, so sensitized to know who you are and what you have done. Even though he is waiting to do wrong for you, you are doing good for him. This is what we see Jesus too has done. He did good to those who were intending evil for them. He forgave them, those who have put him to the cross and nailed him to the cross and led him to all that suffering in the passion. Vengeance is for God to deal with. And instead, we are to do good to our enemies, even as Prophet Elisha, when the Assyrians came to capture them, he actually led them into the very center in Samaria. And instead of destroying them, he told the people to give them food to eat. And it says these people never came back to war with Israel. By doing good even to our enemies, we can change their thinking and their mentality and their relationship with us. Good will always have good results, though sometimes it would be ignored. But certainly it may even touch the heart of a very harmful criminal. Somewhere along the way, their senses will respond to the good that has been done to them. And so in our Christian life, while it may be hard for us to practice compassion as we are called upon, but we should see how important it is for us in our relationship with one another. There is this principle that we see mentioned in the Bible, which is many times attributed to be a biblical teaching. You have heard this saying, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. In Exodus chapter 21, verse 24, and in Leviticus 24, verse 20. And Jesus referred to this in his Sermon on the Mount. But as you see these verses in Exodus and Leviticus, Exodus 21 and verse 24, Moses, speaking to the children of Israel, reminds them of the context in which many times they find themselves. In Exodus 21, I will read from 23. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And it goes on. The principle is simply equal repatriation. What you receive, you should return the same. What you should receive, you will repay the same. This is perhaps what is practiced in the world. And many times people, and I have seen them quote this verse and say, yes, this is from the Bible. Even in Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 20, verse 19, if a man causes disfigurement of his neighbor as he has done, so let it be done to him. Again, same, equal repatriation. What you have received, you are entitled to return back the same. Verse 20, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as he has caused disfigurement of a man, so shall it be done to him. While this practice is mentioned by Moses to be binding upon Israel, he did this because at a time when people during the time of Moses were used to in dealing with relationships. But this is not a principle from God. It is not something that Moses himself instituted. He was only restating what was already in practice. In fact, as I have studied about ancient law codes, this takes us back to even 1,000 years before Moses, to an Assyrian Amorite king named Hammurabi, who is seen to be the father of these ancient laws, one who codified the ancient laws. And it is in his law that we see eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. This is simply Moses using a law that has already been in existence, but this is literally the way of the world, the way how people deal with one another. Of course, logically and philosophically, it sounds good. If somebody has done something to you, you give back. If somebody slaps you, you slap him back. If somebody hurts you, you hurt him. If somebody has cut your hand, you cut his hand. This was equally pacifying the situation. But this is not the way how God deals with. What did Jesus say? Do good to those who hurt you. Bless those who curse you. So the Christian way of life is different. And this is what we see the wise man telling us. In fact, Gandhiji, referring to this verse, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, Gandhiji says, eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. It is true. If one person lost his eye and he, in return, makes another person eye to be lost, so both you have two blind people. This is, well, a logical settlement, but very inhumane. But what Jesus taught is to return good for evil. This is far greater than even what the world practices. We are called, therefore, when you bear a testimony, let it be truthful. As we saw this passage beginning with this important statement, do not be a witness against your neighbor without a cause, and do not deceive others with your lips by speaking falsehood, by giving a wrong testimony. You can be the cause for somebody's wrong decision. Well, it is good perhaps to condemn what is false, but never to change facts and truth and turn it into falsehood. And Jesus was a victim to false testimonies that people gave. But even that wicked and worldly ruler could identify that even two witnesses were not agreeing, though they were bearing false witness against Jesus. Pilate could have easily canceled those witnesses. If there are two witnesses, and unless they agree in what they are saying, those witnesses are invalid. In fact, Bible therefore clearly says you can only condemn somebody if you have two or three witnesses. Maybe two sometimes can connive and give false witness of agreement. But if you even have a third one, which is required, without which punishment cannot be meted out, judgment cannot be given without bias. And so, bearing false testimony is hateful, and we are told to not bear false witness. Deception with our lies, be it literally lying or passing slanderous, malicious slander, these things are what can cause significant harm to a person's reputation or his well-being, and spreading such rumors and gossips can actually malign a person's character. And this is what this proverb is telling us. And so if you were ever called to bear a testimony,
இந்த ரோஜரு கட் ஆயிடுச்சு, பேசுங்க அவகிட்ட. சுடா கால் ரோஜரா this one got cut now.
Mr. Prabha, can you mute your mic, please?
Thank you. If we should bear a false testimony, speak deception with our lies, that can cause great danger when judgment is given by your wrongful words. And in several places, several times in the book of Proverbs, in these wise sayings, we have heard this repeated. And so we see this in verse 28 very clearly, that we should not ever be the cause for a wrong decision by a judge who, hearing a false testimony, may have to pass judgments. And many we see in the book of Proverbs commanding us about honesty, and for us to speak rightfully, bearing a testimony which is truthful. In fact, we have this commandment in Exodus 20, verse 19. Ninth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This is a commandment God has given to us, and we should be careful not to bear a false witness. For Proverbs 19, verse 5, you remember we heard the wise men tell us, a false witness will not go unpunished. You give a false witness, you will certainly receive your punishment. So this proverb is telling us not only simply lying, but never to speak against another person without knowing the full truth. We need to look hard at what we are going to say, for what we say can have adverse effects. Yes, it is true the way how we speak against sin and evil and wrongdoing is different from speaking in the same terms against somebody who has done a wrong to you, and you are jealous and waiting to take revenge. Instead, we are called upon, even if we should have differences with our fellow human beings, we should remove those and we should live in harmony with one another in peace and unity and not wait for an opportunity to take revenge. That will only make us to be enemies with our fellow human beings. Therefore, we see God commanding Israel to love their neighbors as themselves. In Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18, Moses gave them this principle: you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. When Jesus was actually giving the new commandment in answer to that young lawyer who said, which is the greatest commandment? Jesus said, of course, to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. It is actually Jesus taking this phrase from Leviticus 19, verse 18. So we are called upon to love our neighbors because we are of the Lord's. We are His children, and not to take vengeance or to have a grudge against anyone else. The right way to settle, of course, disputes is to forgive and not to harbor grudge and ill feelings. And eventually, you are the one who will suffer more. Not even the one who has wronged you, but you not willing to forgive the one who has wronged you. You will suffer all the more. While this verse is primarily talking about speaking against others, it certainly alludes to deception, which we have to be careful of. Lying about others is never going to be helpful. And trying to speak flattery about others is actually wrong. Or even people who like to tell what others want to hear. And this is a big temptation, even for those who are doing God's work as His children. Many times we want to tell, we want to preach, we want to share from God's word that which people like. What they want to hear, we tell. But many times we fail to tell the whole truth. And this is also, in a way, a lying. When you speak, speak truthfully, never exaggerate what you are saying, and never fail to completely reveal the truth. Don't hide, because it may be hurtful or harmful to somebody. Truth should be spoken openly and without any inhibition. We should never keep away from such kind of activity. Rather, we are called upon to trust in God's justice. We human beings many times want to take the law into our hands. We want to retaliate. We want to take vengeance. Oh, we say, I want to do to him as he has done to me. That is the way of the world. That is how the ancient people practiced and lived. That is not biblical, though it is mentioned in the Bible. We should reject this cycle of retribution. What he gave me, I will return to him. But rather, we should create an atmosphere to end conflicts, and we should show generosity, and we should deal with people in such a manner that by our truthful justice, we will bring about peace and harmony. We are called upon to trust in God's justice. God is the one who will take vengeance. It is certainly wisdom to leave things that belong for God to carry on, rather than we taking justice into our own hands. God's people, as believers, we are called to live above the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth principle and mentality and practice, leaving retribution to God, and vengeance and wise judgment is God. And in dealing with especially our neighbor, as this verse tells us, Jesus gave a beautiful illustration of who a neighbor is. Neighbor is not somebody who is next door to us. Instead, he showed that a neighbor includes everybody who is in need. In that wonderful, true story, I believe, of the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite were no neighbors for him because they left him dying. But here comes a Samaritan who is even looked down upon by the Jewish people, but he is the one who came down to help. And Jesus highly exalts his position as a neighbor. He did against even those who hated him. The man fallen down probably was a Jew. But the Samaritan, and highlighting that he was a Samaritan, is showing in this story what it means to be a good neighbor, willing to help those who are in need without any restraint. Is this person one whom I like? Does he belong to my group or my caste or whatever in our situation? But when we accept everybody as children of God, we build trust. And there is hope in such thinking. And we will be able to show to others what it really means to be a child of God. One who is truthful in his talk, one who does not ever give a false witness, but only always willing to share that which is good and beneficial to somebody. Not to live a life of trying to settle scores with others, hurting others because they have hurt you, striking others because you were struck. But even to those who have despised us and wrongfully used us, we can make them friends by showing our love and concern. And so we as God's people are to set a very high standard and a benchmark. Let God take the role of an avenger, but we should instead show God's great love. And thus we will be able to remove and dissolve any such differences as God's children, and indeed be truly a witness to God's love, as we are called to be such witnesses, thus sharing the gospel with others as a witness to what God has done for you and how God treats every human being. By our witness, the world will know the God whom we serve. May God bless each one of us and lead us in our day-to-day life. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy, for this beautiful